The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the new year. This is the Agile Coaching Network. Agile Coaching Network, God, this is episode 75. I'd never thought that about 4 years ago that when we started all of this, and actually the Coaching Network started kind of earlier than that for me because it was actually something that was running in an old company that I was a part of, and we did it internally. And then we decided to actually expand it out because the conversation talking about Agile and Agile methods actually applied to the whole industry. It just didn't apply to that semiconductor company that I was working at for 32 years, which is a long time to go work in a company, but we were doing Agile and Agile development in very large scale. And the conversations, as we found that actually applied to others. We actually hit the top 25% of all podcasts on Buzzsprout. We're listened to in 120 countries, which is incredibly cool. I never thought that in certain parts of the planet, as I go through each month and look at, well, who's listening to us? I didn't know that there were tech communities in certain parts of the world. And it's actually really cool to hear that we're having an influence worldwide. I'm joined every month, people who've been helping to get the conversation starting for the last number of years. Shauna, Deanna, Jorg, Hendrik, and all of you joined and added your voice to the podcast. It has absolutely done a lot to influence the industry as well as to help others who are right now either starting an Agile adoption or they're stuck someplace in their adoption, or they have something that they discovered and they just want to go share it to everyone, which is incredibly cool. Shauna and Deanna, they're not here this month, but we do have Hendrik and Jorg to get the conversation going. Again, I want to thank them for their support, and let's go ahead and get things going. Well, if you've been looking at the news lately, starting to see the rising tide of layoffs again, mostly based upon projections that, there's going to be slowing in IT spending, there's going to be slowing in product development, continued supply chain issues. There's a whole set of factors that are combining that are starting to see this trend of layoffs in our industry. And it's unfortunate because we could say big numbers, that 10,000 are being laid off at one company or 5,000 are being laid off at another. But reality is it does come down to an individual, a person, which impacts a family, that impacts, I think just the entire kind of ecosystem of things. And Agile practices, and I want to get this back kind of in track with what we're talking about from an Agile perspective. We are hearing some trends, and I noticed that there were some things on Twitter as well as up on LinkedIn talking about particularly one set of layoffs that just occurred. And that was the one that occurred over at Capital One. And this one was very specific from an Agile perspective because it actually called out directly that Capital One, and other companies have been going through this Agile transformation, digital transformation, and they sort of coupled the two things together about the aspect that they feel that they have reached a point in their Agile adoption that they can do a staff reduction. This is not an old trend. I've seen other companies over the years go through this cycle of hiring Agile coaches, getting their transformations going, and then doing something drastic as, having a party and saying, hey, we're all now Agile. And then, less than a couple of weeks later, then they get rid of all their Agile coaches. And that is then met by a period of instability for the company. And then slowly they begin to think through that and that they may have made the wrong choice. I don't know if Capital One is in that state, but there are a number of digital transformations that are going on in our industries. And the question is, from a trend perspective, I'm more looking at it from more or less the human factor of us. How do we as a community, how do we see this, and how do we, from a personal perspective, how do we adjust and how do we go forward in order to continue to build on, one, we're agilists and we want to continue to be agilists, and how do we build higher degrees of resilience within in order to keep these types of trends from occurring again. The other trend is AI. And now AI is, can be seen in a whole bunch of different lights, from anywhere from, autonomous cars to recently seen with the different text creation tools that are out there. There's a whole slew of new technology that's coming online that has people a little bit kind of caught off guard a little bit. Specifically, if you're a tech person, and I've been using some of these tech writing tools probably for about the last 6-7 months. But when you need to get a block of code for something, you can actually, and I mostly do my coding work on embedded processors, but I can ask any of these different tools like to write me a block of code, not just a block of text, but they can write me an IO function that can make an Arduino processor blink a light. Some of the stuff is not that sophisticated, but it does do the kind of the default template, which does change the dynamic of both from a tech perspective as well as a writing perspective. Both sides of the thought worker perspective. These things are going to continue to have more impact, hopefully beneficial impact on us as the industry sort of rolls forward. So my question to get this all going, and I'm sorry that was a little bit long-winded in the start of this, but one, I just want to kind of do a base, if you've been impacted by, or people have been impacted by the recent set of layoffs. I just want to pose that one question: is how are you doing? How is this news, working on you? Is this in some way? Do you think that you should be take particular steps if the downturn is continuing? What are those types of things? How does it impact Agile and in the way that you're doing your Agile coaching or your Agile development? And then the last component of this is what you think about the impact of AI. And so, sort of to kick all of this off, Hendrik, good to have you back, my friend. We haven't had you for a couple of episodes. What's your view on all of this?
First of all, I mean, I'm working since 28 years, and layoff rounds have been with me through my whole career. They come in waves and so on. So I'm actually not like freaking out on this anymore. And I've been on both sides now. I mean, being potentially affected by a layoff. So one time it was really close that I had to leave the company, but I've also been as a manager sitting on the other side, needing to lay off people. And being a manager right now, what steps could people be taking in a downturn, especially in the agile coaching profession? I think when you start thinking about now what steps you should take, then it's maybe too late. One thing I've observed over the time is that, like Ray, what you said, like there are these waves. Companies hire coaches, they go through transformation, and they say, "Okay, we're done. Thank you, coaches. Goodbye." That is happening because in the beginning, often of a transformation, there is a misunderstanding of what agile coaching really means, and people are hired who are passionate about agile and about coaching. And then once the job is done, what to do with these people? They have no other experience than coaching. And then, okay, this is it. And what I have started in my management career, I had the pleasure to actually recruit a coaches chapter a couple of years ago. And what I started to do is looking for people who have maybe worked as, let's say, a project manager, somebody who has really the hands dirty from all the mess that you have when you're running or managing a project. And people who have such a background, deep understanding of operational issues and the nonlinearity of things, who then have become coaches. Very often, such people are much more likely to survive a downturn, because then you know how operations are, and you can maybe become a project manager, a product owner, or somebody go to a role that might be of value at this point in time for the company. So that's maybe one thought I have about the downturn question. become operational, get your fingers dirty in the operations. That's very, very important.
Yeah, I had somebody a long time ago in that space say, don't get too far from the Gemba.
Yeah.
And, you know, stay close to the work, keep your hands in the work. Is that what you're sort of referring to when
also thinking about my own career, I mean, up to 2016, I have been a manager, and I've been doing all sorts of things. I mean, I've been a software developer, a technical coordinator, a project manager, a project office manager. I have managed technology and innovation, all sorts of things. And then 2016, I became an in-house consultant. I was using all my experience, my passion for agile and so on. And for 6 years, I was an in-house consultant. And now, about a year ago, I felt like I'm more and more, feel disconnected from where the heat really is. Situations change, and I felt like I need to feel the real thing again, so to speak, and not just give advice and observe things from the side and so on. And I don't regret the step that I took last year to become a manager again. And now I would say I'm in deep shit, and I'm enjoying it, like because I have all the sorts of problems, and I'm really prepared for this now because I have both an operational background and I have now a coaching background. And that makes me, I think, a much better leader than I have ever been before. So I think walking between coaching, operations, I think that is a good thing to do. It keeps you relevant and up to date.
Sure, that all makes sense. And I'm just kind of curious, you know, when you did your stance as a you know, in the coaching role itself, I mean, what urgency did you feel when you said that I feel like I need to get deeper into the game? I mean, what was your revelation in that? And then if you've been doing coaching for a while, how did you make that transition back to where you're at now? I mean, because you have to ramp up on some stuff. I mean, what steps did you take?
Yeah, I mean, how did I discover? It was more like, you know, you have more and more. I had a really good reputation in the company. More and more people were coming and saying, "Hey, can you help us with this? Can you help us with that?" You're advising, you're building coaching communities. You help people get the right training. You're advising, you run workshops and so on. But then you also feel like you can only do so much. It is a bit frustrating after some time that you see that only a fraction of what you have learned is actually implemented. And that's fine. That's actually quite normal. I mean, because people have a certain level of maturity or agile maturity, and when you give them advice and so on, they maybe reach the next level, but they don't reach where you would dream them to be. So there's always a bit this feeling of, if they could just get this point. But yeah, okay, you need to be patient. It takes a couple of years, things will sink in. And then I discovered that, consulting people, the hardcore operational challenges that people have, I more and more felt I'm still leveraging on my experiences that are 6 years old, but the world is changing. The business dynamics have changed and so on. And I'm starting to lose a bit the contact to what's really happening here. And that was the moment where I felt like maybe it's good to get my fingers dirty again. So I got the feeling, this is, I cannot give honest, clear advice. Now I start waffling about stuff that I haven't really deeply understood because I haven't experienced them.
Right.
What was the second part of your question? You asked, how was the transition?
The transition, yeah.
Well, jump in. One thing I learned as a coach was that, I mean, I'm a super big fan of complexity thinking. And I love the work of Dave Snowden and so on. And of course, one of the things I'm not afraid of is just jumping into something and enjoy the ride. So I was jumping into an organization. I don't understand the technology completely, but I understand how to work with people. And it's a large organization. It's 1,200 people that are operationally working with me. And getting in there, connecting to the people, making them talk to each other, trying to slowly get an understanding of the technology, of the challenges, and so on. My whole coaching background helped me a lot to get that fast. Plus, of course, my previous operational experience helped me to understand roughly what's going on here and then update my knowledge that was 6 years old. So I think just jump in, do, and don't be shy of asking others, making use of the people around you. People are very helpful.
That's really sound advice. I mean, just to contrast to that, I vacillated when I was going from my technical side of my career to management, and I went back and forth between, going into leadership and then back into technical and back and forth. And I think every single time that I went through those transitions, I was thinking to myself, that's a better place where I can have more impact. And I think that's one thing you have to listen to you in your gut, I think sometimes. And I think you express that incredibly well, which is, at this particular point, I think my passion lies there, and I need to go move towards that, which I think is really cool. So Jorg, what do you have on this topic?
Yeah, lots of thoughts. Maybe just to add, I'm actually at the moment going the different way or the opposite way from what Henrik described. So I started actually doing really hands-on, getting the product running and out the door when I joined my company a few years ago. And now I'm actually stepping a bit back to have more time to coach the people around me as they see the efficiency. So I think this, as the layoffs, is a cycle that everybody should be open to, exactly for the benefits that Henrik has been describing. So, and then thinking, what do you need to prepare for? I think multiplying what other people can do is a big strength that you get as a coach. You see people and you recognize potential. That's then bringing this together with AI, because if AI does something, that's great. We're looking for automation and testing, automation everywhere. So this is actually a thing to leverage more of the really intelligent, creative, imaginary, human potential in everybody. And if you can see this and make it a bit more tangible for the company, then you're highly valuable. And that's totally different from enacting a practice, following an agile ceremony, going somewhere. So be aware of what are the strengths of others, what are your own strengths, combine these, and then there is probably always a next step based on communication, thinking, creativity. And as Henrik said, don't be afraid to jump. So we're talking about layoffs of people, but actually in the past years, I've been moving a bit from company to company, and sometimes it feels like I'm just laying off that company because I don't like how it works. So take it as a chance and an opportunity. Don't despair.
Right. No, I think those are all valid. Hendrik, a follow on that just came in. So one person was asking, what did you see as being the big change in 2016? Can you be more specific of what you saw as trends back in 2016?
Up to 2016, I have been managing operations increasingly in an abstract way. And what I see now is that, for example, the spreading of open source, the hyper productivity that has happened, the introduction of DevOps, continuous integration, and so on, the dynamics have changed quite a bit. Things that we have been debating still in 2016 are a given nowadays. Like, for example, in our company in 2016, Agile was still a bit of a discussion. And in the meantime, it's just more or less a commodity. You can always argue how far we came, but I think for a company of our size, we are reasonably agile in our R&D environment. Yeah, I think today the dynamics are different. The market is more aggressive. There is small companies who eat business from the large companies. The need to innovate fast is greater than in 2016. The world has really accelerated, it feels. And that's what I see. And that's very interesting, because this is exactly what the complexity thinking is dealing with. How can we respond at a high speed with a large organization? it's a fascinating challenge for me.
Sure, that all makes sense. Galina, welcome. What's your perspective on all of this?
I wasn't laid off, thank God, this time at least. However, the second question is really, really close to me. How about the impact of AI? And I feel like, well, first of all, I'm not an agile coach per se. I'm actually in Scrum Master role. However, I do agile coaching as well. And there's huge untapped potential in data science organizations. They at the very, very beginning of agile transformation. There is such lack of agile coaches, and a lot of stuff which we as agile coaches learn, skill sets and everything, is very much applicable to data science organizations. However, the process itself is slightly different. Maybe to teach data-driven Scrum, and maybe even to help organizations to transition, because again, it is slightly different from your regular engineering, for example, organization. And even business agility is, it's applicable, still slightly different. There's no Scrum Masters. The role is not Scrum Master, it's called differently. But what I'm trying to say, we need to be open to maybe fine-tune to today's modern world requirements. And I don't think we will be out of job.
I think that's a good perspective. I think, every time so automation, for centuries has always been met by some sort of transition about the way we work.
Right.
The early days, I'm not sure if you know this, but sabotage, that word actually refers to the sandal, a sabu. And Taj was about the throwing of that sandal into the machinery, breaking it down. And this was sort of the protest against the automation of automatic milling, where it wasn't done by hand anymore, but people would sabotage it for those, because they thought it was going to cost them jobs. And reality is it didn't. It actually helped to increase, people being fed more and making the jobs not as hard. And I'm just kind of curious from your perspective as a Scrum Master. Do you have enough time in your day to watch everything to be able to do that job effectively? Could AI help you?
Well, as a Scrum Master, you're still doing the same exact job. Maybe you utilize way more automated metrics, like statistics and stuff like that, so you don't do it manually. But your everyday, day-to-day job is still the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you start, again, I came from an engineering organization. So when I came to data science organization, I understood that I really need to fine-tune my knowledge and switch how I work, how I teach my team, so coach my team, how I coach my organization, and so on and so forth. So it's still same, honestly. It just maybe slightly different how to.
Right. That sort of shift in your workday itself. And Jorg, I think you were originally saying, about automation, and I was thinking about in the early days of manual test, and then eventually being able to shift that over to machine doing things. That still didn't change the next issue, which was now you have more test data, and now you have to do more analysis. So the workload sort of shifted a little bit further downstream. Was that your experience as well?
Yeah, definitely. And the perspective shifts a bit as well with the workload. From actually, what do I need to code to what do I need to achieve? Next thought is, what do people really want? So actually, we're probably going to do more value with less work through this automation as well, because we're not doing work that doesn't make sense. And that's pretty agile.
Frank, what do you have?
Well, I'm fairly new to coaching. I've only been doing it for 4 years. And it's half of my job. The other half is doing Agile training. I started in training people on Agile, and they asked me to do the coaching. And then as you mentioned previously, there's a large intake to get up to speed on coaching. So I've been working with some coaches that are more seasoned, and they've been mentoring me, and I coach teams now on a weekly basis. But with regard to AI, I just think, again, I haven't been affected by any layoffs or AI, but when I think about coaching, it's so much around the behavior and so much around change management and people. And I don't know if AI has matured to that level. I think a lot of people that are thinking about AI replacing these type of service may be thinking about a process, or as you mentioned, helping with coding and other things. But I don't envision a world right now where you can sit in front of a team with a terminal that has AI and they're going to be able to talk through some of the changes in behavior as a team rethinks about how they're going to go about working differently. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think the AI aspects of it are interesting to evaluate, but human behavior part was what I got trained in a lot of facilitation techniques, the processes and principles of Agile, the ceremonies. But one of the things that in the last year and a half that really helped me become more effective with coaching was understanding the change management. So I went through some change management training and understood how to really work with not only individuals, but teams, and recognizing where they're at with their thinking, rather than just thinking I'm going to come in there and teach them a new process. There's a lot more to unpack with that.
Right. And I think that gets back into what what you were saying originally about complexity. And, if anyone's into Dave Snowden's work and, Cynefin, I think AI systems can probably really do well with the complicated work, kind of, I need a block of code that's going to do X, and they're able to go generate that. But I think when it's talking about the human to human connection, or even the human to marketplace, which is just more humans, that interaction is something I don't think AIs will be able to see the nuance, I guess.
Well, I wonder about one thing, and that is, okay, what we see today with ChatGPT, these are not factual correct answers necessarily, because it's actually, it goes by probability. It's an AI, it's not really thinking. So what I think is you need to be an expert to be able to judge whether what the AI told you might be credible or not. You need to be able to question it. Otherwise, you might make a terrible mistake. Having said that, actually, it is maybe also a tool that can augment your decision making and navigate complexity, because complexity thinking means you need to have diversity, you need to have different perspectives. And maybe an AI can give you a perspective that you haven't been thinking about. So I think there is a potential in there, but you need to be very conscious about what you're doing. And of course, it's not wise to let the AI do the job. Yeah, but getting inspired by an AI. For example, I've been trying with ChatGPT. Some answers that I got were, on the one side, they were crappy. On the other side, they inspired me for, hey, wait a second, it's a crappy answer, but it has an element that I haven't been thinking about. Mm. So it enriches diversity, if you will.
Well, that's an interesting point. I mean, I've played with these systems, and I found from ideation. Yeah, I think exactly in that space. I get some rubbish, and then I also get something that's like, well, that's rubbish, but the way that was structured, maybe there's something there, And I think it's sort of, again, back to that, it's augmenting, it's a tool. I think it was just even recently, one of the big universities here in the US actually wrote a policy that said that it's okay to use one of these in your work. And they were kind of relating it to the point of, well, why do we let people who are studying math bring a calculator? It's the calculator helps to speed up, some of the process of the calculation, but it doesn't change the fact that if you're doing proofs, that you have to think. You still have to think with whatever the answer comes from the machine in that case. So that's all kind of fun. Let's see, Sheila. Happy New Year to you.
Oh my goodness. First I want to say my husband is a math teacher, and I just want to weigh in on that real quick, because calculators and getting the answer from some of these places is completely different because the students don't know how they got to the answer. When you're using a calculator, you have to know how to get to that answer. So that's at top of mind. I wanted to go back a little bit to the Capital One layoff thing, and something that you said earlier about, companies that go through this agile transformation and then they're like, oh, we're done. I feel like this one was very publicized, and my concern, and I want to know what other people think about this, but my concern is, will other companies look at this and say, maybe we should review what we're doing here and we could cut costs by moving in the same direction? So that's really where I feel the concern in regard to agile coaching, and even in the case of some companies like getting rid of COEs and other people who are trying to move companies in a better way of working.
I think there's an extreme risk. I don't know what others think on the call as well, but there tends to be, and I don't know where the club is, where CEOs and CFOs and others hang out, but market trend wise, there's always been a couple of, I don't know, fantasies that take place in the world of optimizing your company. And I'll relate this back to when I was doing a test a long time ago, and having at the time a general manager saying, well, why do we need so many test people? Because they're not finding any defects. And I just stood there for a second listening to what the person was asking, and clearly missing the point that test isn't about the number of defects found. It's actually the reciprocal of that is the fact that are we achieving great quality for our customer? Because one defect can spoil the whole product depending on the size of it. And I think the same goes for the agile coach, or the product owners, or the others who are in the role of making sure that we're taking care of the customer and taking care of the team. And somehow that by removing that person because they don't write a line of code, are we going to start measuring people back with KLOCs per hour again? I don't know. But I think that team happiness, team productivity, giving that objective view to the team every once in a while through a retrospective process, I think by a person who's very close to that team, meaning that they know them, I think is both valuable from a productivity perspective, and those coaches never got credit for that productivity. And I think they also, on the other side of that, they just were misrepresented about what exactly their role was in the company. I don't know if that all makes sense. I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but
yeah, that's the crux of the concern, I guess, in my mind, when it comes to this downturn, and how, from a coaching standpoint, how do you elevate your position to where people know the importance and the impact that you're having. Right. I think that's critical in trying to prevent the additional trend of laying off agile practices.
The other perspective on this too is that when you have a downturn, that downturn also, I think, theory of constraint cuts in, and then we get innovations. There's innovations that pop up that we never thought of.
I think AI will make us even more productive, and maybe there will be a short phase where it will maybe remove some jobs, but I think in the end it will probably even generate more jobs, because everybody will become more productive. And then this will just level itself out. I think would be my humble prediction of what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in the same space. I think it's almost like, we just watched the trend of auto driving cars and what a fiasco that's been about an over reliance on that technology, for thinking that it can replace the human brain in a driving situation versus maybe it can help us at slower speeds and, when you're stuck in commute traffic, better guardrails, I guess, about how we use it. I think the same is going to be said for AI and how it eventually fits into the coaching role, and how it can identify a couple of trends that typically take place. And I'll point to one of the things that I've seen, especially in large scale adoptions. Back in my day at Intel, we had like 2,500 Scrum teams, and there was no way that we had enough coaches to cover everyone, and it became important for us to do sense making to understand where was the need, and being able to go look at the data of the burn down charts on all of those teams in order to say, that team needs some help. And we should probably go and just knock on their door and say, hey, we just wanted to say, how's everything going? And they go, how did you know we needed help? Well, because we were looking at the back end data and stuff. Frank, did you have something to add to this?
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting, for them to issue a statement directly with Agile being mentioned as like a shot across the bow. I would think of all the things they needed to comment on regarding their workforce reduction. I don't know why Agile was the target, but it goes back to what you were saying, the idea of your value proposition, tying that back to the performance of the teams and the accomplishments. It's a harder issue, right? It's harder to do that. You can look at some metrics of, hours and where you've been involved, but how does that tie directly to the velocity and ability of the team to perform, right? We're in such a day and age where the coaching and teaching, for that matter, that's my background, has been viewed as an expendable wraparound service. Oh, well, we'll get rid of coaching and we'll get rid of trainers. The teams can take this on, they can self-coach and they can self-train, that kind of stuff. And we really have to go back, and that's one of the things that I've learned through downturns is you always have to go back and think about, how do I make my value proposition of what I do more visible to people at all levels?
Andy Grove, when I joined Intel, he was really close and worked with a lot of the employee base. But he used to always just say, never waste a good crisis. You should come out stronger from a downturn. And I think your point into that, I think is very important. Another one is there was a comment that says that, that whole point about check marking the box that we're now agile is part of this. And the other part would be also, was management genuine when they said what their intent was with their digital transformation? Because all digital transformations are going to have a bubble, meaning that you're going to have to either add people to it in order for it to accelerate the digital transformation, or you're going to have to slow down the work product a little bit so that you can do that transformation. And theoretically, out the end of any digital transformation is going to be higher productivity. Now, you could respend that investment of more productivity towards developing new products or lowering cost and saying that I now want to go take off 30% of my workforce because we replaced 30% of that workforce by optimizing. So I think management needs to be really genuine when they start these transformations to say that what we expect at the back end of this transformation is a smaller company. I think leadership could do a good job there. Now, that's not a good recruiting line, by the way. I don't know who would go join a company that says, yeah, by the way, when we're done, we're gonna throw you out.
Well, the first thing is, I think that one of the problems that we run into is using the word transformation, because that has an end. And I've talked to people who are agile coaches who say, I can't wait till everybody is transformed, except it's not really a transformation that has an end. It's more like a never-ending journey, because there's always going to be something that needs to be upgraded or a new product that comes along, or a technology that's become obsolete or a new version that needs to be implemented. And you still need to approach it in an agile way, but it's not exactly the same. And what we mean by agile has evolved a lot over time. When I first got certified as a Scrum Master, it was like, well, you kind of have to write the user stories and then beg the product owner who's somewhere out in the business to get involved enough to at least look at them before you do your development. And now most of the time that person might be writing those stories, and they may even know what they're doing enough to write them where they're writing, where it's implementation agnostic, or they may be writing it based on their current system, which is totally inadequate. And you really have to play 20 questions to find out what they actually wanted, but they are much more involved than they used to be. The next thing I had is, I think part of the fault does lie with Agilists, because I've been working with a lot of them more recently who don't think that they need to understand the business, and that they don't think that they need to understand the technology. And Agile can be applied outside of IT, but even within IT, you need to understand enough about what people are talking about to be able to add value and not be just seen as a bean counter, and someone where they want to have the conversation away from you, which I've seen happen a lot in some organizations. Another problem with the reason people are moving away from Agile is if they just took people who were in a different role. Like, say they had somebody who was a business analyst and they said, well, the business analyst is writing the requirements. In Agile, the product owner might do it. So let's just make all the business analysts product owners. But they never really explained the differences in the role, the differences in the approach, and people just kind of have to learn, go by the seat of their pants. So that's another concern I have, where we are at fault as Agilists if we allow these things to proceed without raising objections.
Yes.
When you talk about the difference between AI and a calculator, when I was in school, we weren't allowed to use calculators. We had to use a slide ruler algorithms, but you still had to know basic math to do it. So those were obsolete tools at the time because everybody had calculators, but we just weren't allowed to use them. So having people use, I could never use a slide rule. I couldn't see well enough, but I could get the right answer with algorithms, but it was kind of like, I know how I got the right answer, but do I understand algorithms well enough to know how I got there? Not necessarily, sort of, kind of, but it's not much different than now moving from calculators to AI in some situations. I mean, it's still just a continuation of the technology. Oh, and going back to, we're sometimes at fault. I was in an organization where they had a regression test bed. They were busy moving everything from a current platform to a new platform. And I was telling them, you've got to move the test bed because we've got a bunch of automated stuff that QA was running like 10,000 cases a day to make sure they weren't breaking anything when new stuff was added. But they heard the word regression, they thought waterfall, they blocked it out, and they didn't want to move any of the test data. And I'm like, but this is like, this organization had been doing a version of Agile for several years. So this was several years worth of carefully selected test cases that would make sure that they weren't accidentally breaking something. And nobody in the Agile PMO understood that there was value in this because they were thinking in terms of frameworks and they weren't thinking in terms of the need for the business or even the technical process. So again, I think there's a lot of times that it's the business doesn't understand because a lot of people compartmentalize too much and they don't understand.
Right. I fully agree with all those points. Let's see real quick. We want to get a few more comments in before the top of the hour here. Robert, what do you have?
Hey, just a comment. My financial services banking company is in desperate need of coaching because the teams really struggle. So at least our organization, we don't have enough coaches to support the need. It's interesting about the AI concept. We used to, just to comment on that, when I was a software engineer, developer, we would like, my boss would be really mad if I spent more than 4 or 8 hours in a peer review in the aerospace industry. So like, let's take it 8 hours to do a peer review. Fast forward, years later, I become a manager, and my team, with all the sophistication, computer systems, tools, and everything, now to do a one-line code change, the Olympic gold medal record is 20 hours. So it takes twice as long to do a peer review with all the tools, automation, and everything. So I think if AI continues in that direction, there will be a plethora of jobs. It's not, it takes more work to keep all the systems running. And the comment I usually get when I mention that is that, well, yeah, we're just doing a lot more these days. You're doing the 20-hour code review has a lot more process and procedures wrapped around it. And we're doing thorough because the tools allow us to do more than your manual 4 to 8 hour code review 20 years ago.
Right.
Thought I'd mention that. That's kind of interesting phenomenon. Another thing that I've noticed is there's a lot of talk about like outsourcing and globalization going away because AI is going to take over everything, and companies aren't going to need, maybe that's what we're seeing by these layoffs. They're thinking they're already there, not going to need the workforce. So I thought that was interesting to see articles mentioning, specifically identifying like outsourcing and globalization as not being needed going forward. Thought that was interesting.
Well, thank you for that. It looks like we are at the top of the hour, and I want to appreciate everyone's contributions today. I know that we didn't get to everyone who wanted to talk about this particular subject. I mean, this is a pretty broad topic that we could probably spend a few podcasts on. But still, I'd like to thank everyone for your contributions, especially Jorg and Hendrik. I could not do the show without you. The next Agile Coaching Network will be on February 24th, same time. That will be the next live event. If you'd like to attend the next live event, you can come over to acnpodcast.org and you can find the registration information there. Just click on that to join us. We'd love to have you a part of the conversation. The other thing to let you know is that we now have a forum system set up. So if you want to talk about any of the subjects that are going on in the podcast, you can also equally go to acnpodcast.org and you can join the forum system that's on there. That's part of the overall system that we've just set up, and we hope that that will keep people talking and as we bridge between the month. I hope everyone has a great month, and I look forward to seeing you soon. The ACN podcast is for educational and informative use only. If you'd like to know more about the ACN community, please come up to acnpodcast.org and support our show.